What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Zero Mile ADV, a true beginner's guide to adventure motorcycling from a beginner's perspective. I just finished the new Mexico BDR. We kind of did like a BDR X, a really large BDR X, because we started and finished in Albuquerque. So, as with everything on this channel, I'm going to talk about, do I think if I was a beginner, would I shoot for New Mexico as my first one? Now, quick caveat, I've only done two. I've done Colorado and New Mexico. So with that, let's get into my thoughts on New Mexico. What do I think about it for a new rider? Would it be something I'd prepare for? So with that, let's get into it. But first, if you're not aware, I have been working really hard on making Motorcycle Apparel a company. I am currently wearing our Zero Mile flannel. This is CE AA rated slide protection in all the impact areas. So here in the elbow, in the back, in the shoulders. It is also reinforced buttons here with Dyneema, a proprietary Dutch company. The Dyneema is woven into the denim pieces here, also reinforced in the buttons so that the buttons won't rip out, but you don't have to wear a zipper, so it is not like a regular jacket. I'm also wearing our single layer CE AA rated jeans. They are super comfortable. They've got a nice gusset here in the middle, so that not only does it flex and breathe, so it's easier to get on and off the bike, it breathes, it's more comfortable. We also have a flexible waistband. If you're interested, our products are currently in our first run. If you're interested in being a first edition member, go to zeromileadv.com, download our free BDR checklist. That'll get you on the list. Long story short, because people complain my intros are too long, that'll get you on the list. We only have about 200 products or so. There's about 500 people on the list. So if you want to be a first edition member, get some free swag, lifetime discounts, etc., go get on that list. Get your opportunity to get your hands on some first edition Zero Mile gear and be an official first edition member. They'll get you perks nobody else will get. So with that, let's get into New Mexico BDR. Okay, so if you are like me, and maybe some of you are, because some of you watch this channel, when I first started riding my adventure bike, I didn't even have a motorcycle license until 3 years ago. And honestly, it was coming down a road from Gunnison, Colorado. We were coming into Montrose, and I saw these guys on KTMs, which I now know are KTMs right now. And I was like, that looks so awesome. I've always wanted to ride motorcycles. It always looked fun. My friends had street bikes when I was younger, but I just never got my license, and I never had the money to buy a motorcycle. So now I was like, I want to do that. I want to get a motorcycle, and I want to do that. And when I got my first adventure bike, the pinnacle was doing a BDR. And for me, it always seemed so far out of reach. It always seemed like something it would take years and years for my skills to develop. But last year I was able to, within just 2 years. So I was like a year and a half into riding, and I did the Colorado BDR with CMA. CMA is Colorado Motorcycle Adventures. I also rode the New Mexico BDR with CMA this year. And so now I have 2 BDRs under my belt. So the fact that I went from thinking that I could never do a BDR to now accomplishing my second BDR and actually riding this one far better than Colorado, which is to be expected, truly is a big accomplishment for me as a new rider. And so for somebody that is new and is looking to do a BDR, what are my thoughts on New Mexico? The reason I rode New Mexico is it seemed like, it was super accessible because it's close. I'm in Colorado. So that was one reason I chose New Mexico. 2, the group that I rode with before, CMA, was going there, and they were leading another group. So that riding with a group makes it easier, at least for me, because I have some friends who ride, but it's like herding cats trying to get anybody together or trying to get the plans and work and kids and all that stuff. So a lot of times it's just easier it is easier for me to just like have a tour group, know that they're going, I can just sign up and go, and that means I can knock out the BDR. Okay, so let's talk about the route in New Mexico. And again, I'm only comparing this to Colorado because that's my only experience. Some of the other BDRs may be better for a beginner. I don't know. This is my experience of riding 2 BDRs as a beginner. The southern section of the BDR from the south end all the way up to the town of Reserve, it is very loose and very sandy. Now out here in Colorado, like in this BLM land where I ride a lot and I have like my practice loops out here, a lot of times it's just quality dirt roads. There's not a lot of gravel. where a lot of the route in New Mexico is deep gravel and sand. So if you get out near the White Sands Missile Range, which you kind of cut through, a lot of sand through there. Even coming from Cloudcroft, you know, the back section of Cloudcroft isn't so bad. It was a little gravelly, but climbing out of Cloudcroft and coming down, a lot of loose rock. But that was kind of a 2-track, more technical kind of Chloride Canyon style riding. And so if you are thinking about doing New Mexico and you are new, the one thing I would highly recommend you practice is getting comfortable in sand and riding in deep gravel, because the way the Department of Transportation in New Mexico gravels the roads, a lot of times you're riding in gravel that is probably 1 inch or 1.5 inches thick. And so you really have to get comfortable at least getting the bike up to about 35 miles an hour, which for me, I rode a KTM 890R. I didn't take this bike. That's a whole other story as to why I didn't take this bike. I couldn't, essentially. It needed to get fixed. So we'll do another video on that. But 890R, and at least on that bike, at about 35 miles an hour, it started to feel more stable at speed. It wasn't so loose. For me, the faster I pushed, sometimes the scarier it got, because the consequences, obviously, at 40 or 55 miles an hour, a lot more if you wreck. And so when the bike is just swimming underneath you, it can get uncomfortable. However, on a BDR and doing like 1,200 miles, you get used to it pretty quick. So if I was new and I was going to do New Mexico, a lot of it is sand and loose, deep gravel. So you need to get comfortable riding in those sections. So if you have areas in your town where it is a lot of gravel roads, flat corners, loose corners with deep gravel, go ride those. Let's talk about some of the more fun sections and the more stuff that I really enjoyed. For me, I felt that the route really got good. I think it was section 6, starting out of Reserve. Now, we did ride Chloride Canyon, which is considered a hard route. It is considered, like, if you look at the BDR map, it is considered an expert section. It's like highlighted red. Chloride Canyon, I didn't think was that hard. Although out here, I have a lot of that style riding where it's 2-track and rock, and I'm just more comfortable in that. I also mountain bike a lot, so I'm used to riding in technical rocky terrain. But again, I didn't think it was that technical, and it was super fun. I will finish on Chloride Canyon and maybe why you might want to bypass it instead of riding it. Even though that was probably one of my favorite sections, was Chloride Canyon. That section was really fun. But after you get out of there and you get to the town of Reserve, and then you start to work your way north, because it does a big horseshoe. The sections from Reserve up to basically the Colorado border, I thought made the BDR worth it. The lower sections, I really wasn't that into. It was okay. The scenery isn't that great. A couple nice sections, but nothing to really write home about. So if I was to do New Mexico again, which I don't think I will, I would just do the northern section because I've done the southern section now. There's no desire for me to reride that stuff. But from Reserve up to Colorado, the Colorado border, when you climb out of Reserve, first off, you're in Reserve is really, really remote. So you're out near the Arizona border, and there's just nothing out there. It's one of those spots when you stop and you go outside and you look at the stars at night, like they're just so bright because there's just nothing around. I think from Reserve, you're about 4.5 hours via highway to Albuquerque. So if you needed a major city for whatever, you're a little ways out. So you're in the middle of nowhere, and you climb up kind of the top of the mountains there, and you have these views over Arizona that are just amazing. And I think one of the unique things about BDRs, and one thing that I've really come to enjoy, is that I feel like the BDRs take you places that most people never go, right? Like a lot of times I ask myself, like, why was this road even built, And a lot of times it seems like it's just for open cattle grazing, because we saw a lot of cattle and some just beautiful bulls, by the way, like the most magnificent, massive cattle I've ever seen. These bulls were just huge. Anyways, I digress. But you get up there and you just see some just amazing views. And when those high altitude roads are a lot more fun because they're not as graveled. So you get some really good quality dirt, so you can have a lot of fun. You don't have a lot of sections in Colorado where it is just sheer consequence, like Ophir Pass or climb any of the Lake City sections, you know, basically the high alpine or alpine loop, or basically from Lake City to Telluride through the San Juan Mountains, there's a lot of high consequence areas where if your bike goes over that edge, it's done, you might also be done. So none of that. A couple spots where it wouldn't have not been fun, you know, a steep drop off, but you could have recovered, and it wouldn't have been that bad. So nothing that is like sheer consequence like Colorado. And then once you get past from Grants to Cuba, or Cuba, whatever you want to call it, that was probably my favorite section. It was like the San Juan Mountain section of Colorado, in that the scenery just never ends. Every time you come around a corner, as somebody who likes to take photos, and I guess you could call me a photographer, I'm not very good, but I like to take photos. I could have spent a half a day back there with my camera in just the cool scenery. And pro tip, for this route, it seems like most people ride it. We rode it around Memorial Day weekend. So kind of end of May, first week of June seems to be the prime time, because when you are down low, it's not so hot. You know, we hit like mid 90s on our last day coming into Albuquerque. You are altitude a lot, so you're going to be in like the 70s most of the time on the route, and there shouldn't be any snow. We didn't come across any snow. A little bit of mud up on section 8, which was really fun. The last section we hit a little bit of mud, but nothing too crazy. So route, as far as the route goes, nothing overly technical or complicated. So I would say if you are new and you're going to go ride this, I would probably practice, like I've said, repeating myself here, sand and loose gravel, because there's a lot of it. There are some technical sections. Section 8, there is a long kind of rocky section up there where there's a lot of embedded rock. But I feel like if that's not really you're not familiar with it, you can go slower through there and you can pick your way through. It'll just take you a little bit longer, so you'll be okay. Okay, so let's talk about food and fueling, which I think are two of the challenges on the New Mexico BDR. So if you're new and you're the type of person who just doesn't care and you don't mind like camping and you don't mind being by yourself, I still don't know that I would recommend a solo BDR if you're new, because you could still get in. I mean, if one mistake, right, at 30 miles an hour in how remote this route is, and you could be in some serious trouble. So I wouldn't, for me, in my skill level, I wouldn't do it by myself. But if you're new and you have some buddies that are going to go and you're going to camp, because it is so remote, there are a million camping options, especially once you get up high into the hills, which is most of the route, because it kind of just follows the mountains that kind of weave through New Mexico. A lot of camping options. So if you like being remote and you like being out in the middle of nowhere and you don't want anybody around, probably a bonus. When it comes to food, honestly, we didn't really stop anywhere that I felt was amazing. You know, having really only spent time in Taos and Santa Fe, I can tell you right now, the rest of New Mexico life is a far cry from the lifestyle of the people living in Santa Fe and Taos to some degree, although parts of Taos can be a little bit rougher because there's a decent amount of, you know, unfortunately just a lot of poverty in New Mexico. So with that being said, the food options weren't that great, I don't think. Fuel also was a problem from Elephant Butte to Reserve. When we left the Elephant Butte area, we did not fuel up there because the route we kind of came in, we actually stayed up in Socorro. And then we kind of worked our way down. So we bypassed Elephant Butte and we got to the town of Winston, and there's one gas station there, and it is only open, it was closed on like Mondays and Tuesdays, and we were there on a Monday. And so we were now essentially an extra 50 miles from the closest gas station, and we still had 200 miles to go. So we had to backtrack to Elephant Butte. Luckily we had a support van that brought extra gas and then refueled us up, topped us off back at Winston, so then we could finish the route. I will say that section from Elephant Butte to Reserve, it was a long day. Riding Chloride Canyon, it is just slow because it is more technical. It was a lot of fun, and I wished I could have just rode Chloride Canyon and then finished and not had to do the rest. And what made it even more challenging for us is not only do we have the extra basically 100 miles for fuel, They're actually off the main route. There's currently a bypass because there's some bridge work on the main route. So after we came out of Chloride Canyon, we then had to do this big bypass, and that took extra time. So we started at 7:45 in the morning, and we weren't off the bike until 8 p.m. So it was a full 12-hour day in some very remote sections. So if you're planning on doing New Mexico, some of these small towns, if you have the dates laid out, I might call to verify that they're going to be open. If you're looking for food and if you're looking for water and gas, like just make sure that, call ahead. Take 5 seconds to be like, hey, I'm coming through there. I just want to make sure you're going to be there because I'm going to rely on you when I come through. Not something we did as a group because they had done this before and the gas station was open, and in this time it was closed. So again, just very, very remote. So when it comes to fuel and gas, you have to be more kind of cognizant about where you're stopping, especially in that southern section. Even the northern section, it is also very remote. Unless you're going to dump into Santa Fe, whatever. I'm getting sidetracked, but it's just very remote. So definitely plan those things ahead, and make phone calls because it is worth it. Because the last thing you want to do is be out there and then need to find out what you're going to do. So one phone call ahead of time that'll take you 5 seconds could save a lot of hassle. So some things that I learned on my second BDR. Honestly, what was really unique is I'm generally a big bike kind of guy. Having had a KTM 1290 Super Adventurer, I've talked a lot about how I want the 1290 Super Adventurer R, and on Colorado, I really wanted that bike again. But on this one, because New Mexico was just so loose, and there was just so much like dirt and sand riding, I didn't really want the big bike. I really appreciated the middle-sized adventure bike. The 890R is not great on the highway. Also, there was some decent amount of road sections, some really good road sections too, which are nice after spending a lot of time just like shimmying for hours. It's nice to get on some nice pavement and some really good quality pavement, especially like coming up over into Winston was really nice. There's just you come through some cool other little like mountain towns on the road, which is nice. So this tour kind of changed my mind on the big bike thing. So I'm going to do a video on that. Like it might have shifted my opinion on big bike and why the middleweight adventure bike might be the best, and why it might actually, all of you guys who've been talking crap on my channel about how big bikes are terrible, maybe I've learned my lesson and maybe you're right. The middleweights kind of seem the way to go. I think one other last thing that I learned that was really important, on this ride, our leader kind of seemed a bit interested in rallying the BDR rather than riding the BDR. So what do I mean by that? And why is that important? There was kind of a running joke amongst everybody. I was with 9 other guys, 10 including me. 9 other guys, and the running joke was like, oh, the leader didn't see that because he was too worried about going fast, right? And always riding super fast. And so I think if you go with CMA, I think they do a really good job. They do, especially in these remote situations, like the hotel accommodations and stuff were the best you can get in these local areas. So they do a good job there. But I think it's really important to ride your own ride. And it doesn't really matter how fast you are if you basically end up in the hospital, right? And so there were a number of times for me where I sat in the back. Actually, I sat in the back most of the time, and I'll do another video on that because I think if you're going to go with a tour group, there's definitely some advantages to riding in the back, both as far as improving your skills, a whole bunch of other things. So I'll do a video on that. But riding in the back, I was able to just set my own pace. And I kind of just, some of these backcountry dirt roads that are loose, there was one day where I was riding at 55 miles an hour and I couldn't see the leader. I couldn't even see the dust tracks. So my assumption is he and some of the other guys were doing 70 on these dirt roads. I don't know that I should be doing that. Obviously, if they wanted to do that, they can. Definitely not the best decision for me. So I just had to not care about them waiting on me and showing up, because it is much better for them to wait a couple minutes for me to show up than it is for me to end up in the hospital. And so I think one thing that I learned is, especially if you're with a group of guys, like, ride your own ride. Don't be worried about trying to be the best rider, show that you're the fastest, because if you're having to get airlifted out in the middle of nowhere, it is not good for you. It is not good for anybody else. So definitely ride your own ride. Okay, so if you're thinking about doing your first BDR, would I recommend New Mexico? Yeah, I think I would, because it's not overly complicated. There aren't a lot of areas that are of high consequence. And I think, to my last point, if you ride your own ride and you know, like, there's most things that you can kind of just pick your way through, and nothing where I really felt in over my head, or where it was like, if I make a mistake, I'm dead. Kind of like Colorado, and with Colorado, that's mostly the San Juan mountain sections where it is just a sheer drop off on one side, and it is technical riding. Now the standard Colorado route has a bypass, so it is now considered a technical or expert route to go over the high alpine loop there. But if you're going to do that, it's probably definitely worth it. But for a beginner, New Mexico is probably really approachable. Just practice your sand, practice your deep dirt or deep gravel, and you'll be fine. I just wouldn't recommend doing it by yourself, because it is so remote. Just make sure you have people with you, because if something goes wrong, you know, at least there's people there to support you, help you figure out how to get out, etc. So with that, thanks for sticking around. That was New Mexico. It was pretty awesome. Really excited to have 2 under my belt. I want to do the South Dakota BDRX, and I still really want to do Idaho. I also learned on this trip that Idaho seems to be one of the best BDRs, and it is one I still want to do. There is another group that does Idaho, so maybe next year I will get on that list, because again, I can just go with them, get it on the calendar, and make it happen. So maybe next year I will do Idaho with them, since they're doing Idaho. So thanks. If you've made it this far, subscribe, hit the like button, all that YouTube stuff. I really appreciate it, and stay safe out there.